the open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And now I hand it over to Carl Richardson.
Good evening, everybody. Why don't we start off with introductions? I am Carl Richardson. I am the acting chair of the Boston Disability Commission. And to my far right,
Hi, I'm Krista McCosh, the Disability Commissioner for the City of Boston.
John Winsky, resident of the Symphony Fenway area.
And I'm Jerry Boyd, and I'm a resident of West Roxbury.
to my left,
My name is Dusia Lebowski.
Thanks.
My name is Dusia Lebowskaya, and I am a resident of Boston, live in Mission Hill.
Hi, Eugene Gloss, resident of Hyde Park.
Felicia Battles Birdsong, resident of Dorchester.
Zaria Amir Hosseini, resident of Boston.
and is there anybody on the phone? Any commission members on the phone? Okay, hearing none. Let's move on to the next agenda item, but before we do, we still have a lot of new members that don't necessarily know each other yet. So I would suggest that every time we speak, if we say our name, that'll allow us all to get to know each other. That would be helpful, especially for me, since I can't see you. I'll get to learn your voices, so that would be helpful. Thank you. Next is the approval of the May and June minutes. I hope everybody had a chance to read them. And do I hear any motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for last meeting.
Any
Anyone
second?
second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, that was easy. Next, we're going to have two introductions tonight. Two presentations tonight. And the first of the presentation is Tim Davis, who's going to talk about the Disability Housing Task Force. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Member Richardson and all the other members of the Commission, and also Commissioner McCosh. I'm Tim Davis. I'm the Housing Policy Manager at the Boston Planning and Development Agency. This is our boardroom, so welcome to our room. The Disability Housing Task Force has been working for a number of months, I think it's 18 months or so, to look at ways in which we can increase access, make the processes easier, make it easier for people to find units that are suitable to their needs. While I have only been in my position less time than this task force was actually operational, it's been my honor to assist the task force. And while I can't speak directly on behalf of Sheila Dillon and the Department of Neighborhood Development, I will try to cover some of the ground that both BPD and DND cover. Chief Dillon is actually out on a couple of well-needed days of vacation. So it's my understanding that members of the Commission have received the final or near final draft of the Disability Housing Task Force report, which we plan to release on Wednesday. I can say that on behalf of both of our agencies that we're aware of the challenges many people face when attempting to find housing as suited to their needs. I first became aware of it more directly when I worked at D&D myself in the late 90s and early 2000s, and my supervisor had a very difficult time finding a property that was suited for his needs. While he was able to find and adapt a home in North Cambridge eventually, it also forced him to ask for a waiver from the city residency requirement so he could find something that was suitable. So being able to actually house people in Boston is, I think, an important goal for us. Among some of the main accomplishments of this plan, speaking first in terms of what the Boston Planning and Development Agency is doing, my role is I work directly with the inclusionary development policy and all the efforts to get private developers to create income-restricted housing without public subsidies. That's both through the creation of what we call on-site inclusionary development units that have no public subsidies, and are income restricted to moderate to middle income households. And also, sometimes developers, instead of creating those units on site, will pay into a fund that is controlled by the Department of Neighborhood Development that they combine with other resources to create affordable housing across the city. For these on-site units, as we call them, previous to now, we've actually had no requirement that those inclusionary development units are also suited for disabilities. Now, a developer is, many developers, if they have enough units on their property, are required to have such units on the property, but are they also inclusionary development units? So over the last year, in my role, we have been requesting that we have units that are both income restricted and built out for certain disabilities, but we've not had a requirement. So going forward, we're going to have, we're proposing a board vote for August for the BPDA board that would actually require that 15% of inclusionary development units in projects where they are required, or where these units are required, would also be for those who are disabled. That would increase the number of units that we have in our portfolio. To date, in fact, we're also increasing our ability to know what's in our portfolio. In some cases, in some of these older projects, we don't even know which units are Group 2 units and which ones are not. So that's one of the important things that we're doing as well. It improves access, providing a preference, but we're also working with the Disabilities Commission to assist with confirming eligibility for this preference so as to ensure the integrity of the program. So in other words, because there's a preference for this unit, and it is a preference that exceeds the Boston residency preference for some of our inclusionary development units, we want to make sure that the people who are in these units need these units. So the Disabilities Commission is going to help us with that. Also, and this has been something that has been going on for a year or more already, is that through our housing compliance unit, when a client comes to us who's applying for a unit, we have to check them for eligibility for incomes and assets. There are certain situations where there may be assets that exceed our asset limits but are necessary that for someone with a disability that aren't necessary for someone else. So we've become more flexible in our processes around those things. Also, I work with the Housing Compliance Unit directly, but our Development Review Division has established a disability checklist, an accessibility checklist, and that is included in the package as well. I think it starts on page, let's see what page it starts on. It starts on page 18. So we have an accessibility checklist that was updated and approved by our board in March. I'm sure it'll get, as time goes on, we'll make some changes as we look to see how this actually works out. It covers a range of topics related to not just units with accessibility features, but also existing site conditions that could be improved, as well as proposed conditions that could serve as new barriers to access. So staff from the Disability Commission work with our design staff to make sure that we're not creating new problems, that we're actually trying to increase the accessibility both inside the building, inside the units, but also on the surrounding streets and sidewalks. D&D has a number of programs that can improve housing outcomes. They're going to look at prioritizing individuals with disabilities and their work around the Office of Housing Stability, new mortgage programs or funds for adaptations through the Boston Home Center, also through the Homeless Intervention Services. But I think the most important thing that they're going to do is that currently for properties where D&D is providing public money, that there is the standard 5% of units that are built out for those with a mobility impairment. They're increasing that to 10%. So that's I think a big change. And that's for the whole building. It's not just for the affordable units, it's actually for the building as a whole. And I think in sort of an announcement that's kind of just some good news that's coming out right now is that the previously approved Harmon Apartments in Dorchester, right near where I live, which is intended to serve those with neurodegenerative disorders and is located adjacent to the Boston home, is, and it's an independent living building, is about to break ground. They're out there surveying and putting the stakes in the ground and everything right now, and we're expecting their closing within the next few weeks. So that's a really nice thing to have, and it's something very unusual for any city to have something where those who have those disorders can live independently but also have access to the special services of something like the Boston Home. So if there's any questions or thoughts, and Commissioner McCosh, I'm sure, can say a few things as well on the process.
Yes, I'd just like to thank Tim very much for his hard work, and also Chief Dillon, who's always been a strong advocate for people with disabilities. This task force was formed after the mayor released his plan called Housing Boston 2030, which looked at the long-term goals in the city over the next 15 years. And what we realized when we were drafting the report was that there was no attention being paid specifically to people with disabilities who didn't fit in a category of elderly. So we wanted to focus on non-elder people with disabilities, individuals and families, and make sure that they had been looked at and talking about what their needs would be, and really coming up with some programs. So I think the main takeaways that we're thrilled about that BPDA supports and D&D supports are things like Tim mentioned, like looking at special needs trusts. And we know that they're not there to have people be wealthy, but they're there to take care of ongoing home care and medical needs, equipment, things like increasing the built-out units from 5% to 10%, and then requiring a certain percentage, I believe it's 15%, of the affordable units to also be accessible. So instead of asking developers to consider these things, now it's going to be a mandate. So we really hope that these policies will help people be able to stay in the city, because we know that if you can't find housing, oftentimes people are left to either homelessness or rehabs, or their conditions can go right downhill. So we're working hard on the homelessness and on the just housing in general. One other piece of this that we're working on is accessory units. Did you mention that, Tim?
The Housing Innovation Lab, which is a program that was initially funded by the Bloomberg Foundation, is now, actually that's another announcement that's just coming out, is that the mayor's office is going to fund this program ongoing, is looking at a number of ways that we can increase the availability of all kinds of different housing types. And one is an accessory dwelling unit program. I'm not sure all the neighborhoods it's going to be piloted in. I know Mattapan is one of them, but it gives families the opportunity to create accessory dwelling units within the existing house structure, whether it's, so if it's turning a porch that could be closed in and turned into another unit, or a basement, or other things that can be done that kind of within the envelope of the house to create a dwelling unit that is sort of like you would in the past would be thought of like as a mother-in-law unit. But we know that mother-in-law units serve all kinds of purposes and all kinds of different people who might need something like that. They'll also, I think, eventually look at other things such as carriage houses and other things that are adjacent to a home that can be turned into a small dwelling unit.
And I think one of the big important things that will come out of this whole process is that BPDA, D&D, and my office, and Fair Housing and Equity are all working together to coordinate our services, along with the new Office of Housing Stability. So I think this program and announcements is something that we'll keep an eye on and track moving forward to see if we can measure some sort of impact that we're having. And just another follow-up on the homelessness piece is that we're also working with D&D on a housing surge geared specifically for people with disabilities. Those are one-day events where people come into a site and they get matched with the housing option right on the spot. So like Tim said, looking at the different options, whether it's rental, purchase, you know, short-term stay, just getting people into safe, secure housing is really the goal.
And this housing surge process, which is under the Office of Housing Stability and D&D, not our office, they piloted the first time working with veterans who were experiencing homelessness. And it really was so successful that I think they've had a couple more that were for more general folks who are experiencing homelessness. And I think we're thinking that those kinds of surges can be done with a number of different special population groups, or even in very specific neighborhoods where we're concerned about potential displacement because of gentrification.
And one program that could potentially help homeowners is we're looking at creating a loan fund, which will be for people who are just over the income limits for the Massachusetts Home Modification Loan Program. Some people could keep relatives at home or remain in their home themselves, but they can't afford a ramp or to do a bathroom over. The state has a fund that they currently use, but you have to meet certain income guidelines, and we know how expensive things are in Boston. So even if you have a higher income, usually it's all spent on necessities. So we're looking now at figuring out what income levels we could use to kind of bridge the gap between people who can really afford it on their own and people who make just too much to qualify for assistance.
Excellent.
Does anyone have questions or comments?
This is Felicia Battles Birdsong, and I just want to say kudos. I think you are doing, that's a great idea. It's been in my head for some time, so I applaud you for the great work that you're doing. You did mention about specific chronic illnesses that the neuro piece is working. That was a fabulous idea, I think, and I think I'm hoping you'll be doing more projects like that after this one.
Certainly, and it's always in some parts it's the organizations that come to us and are looking for funding that is part of the pipeline. But
Okay.
but when we see projects, I mean, the Harmon, when it came to us, both to our agency and to D&D, I think it was just, we threw up our arms with, yes, how can we make this happen? So sometimes it's helping those along, but I think if there's other organizations like the Boston Home that realize that this has been successful, I think they'll have more who will come to us and say, we're willing to do this. I mean, another one right now that's it's a little different, but it is also for, I can't remember the name of the moment. It's in there's a new veterans one out.
Freedom Homes?
No, it's out in Brighton. There's
Oh.
another one in Brighton that's veteran focused. It's coming along.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And to celebrate this momentous achievement, the mayor is going to announce the report on Wednesday at 11 a.m. in City Hall. I would love it if people from the board could come, and also members of the disability community are welcome to attend, and really just congratulate, the task force and all their hard work, and thank the mayor for his ongoing support. Any other questions for Tim?
Thank you.
Thank you for all your help on this and hard work. Next, we have John Kelly, a former commission member himself from Second Thoughts.
Could we make it a little lower? The microphone, I mean. Yeah. Cool. I'll pull this away. All right. Thank you very much. My name is John Kelly, and I'm the director of Second Thoughts Massachusetts, Disability Rights Advocates Against the Legalization of Assisted Suicide. We are the state affiliate of Not Dead Yet, the national grassroots group that has long opposed the devaluation of people with disabilities, and especially assisted suicide. Not Dead Yet was formed when Jack Kevorkian was on his killing spree of people that were supposed to be terminally ill, but in fact more than half of them were not and had disabilities. Unfortunately, the media and much of society do not really understand the difference, or do not see a difference between people with severe disabilities and people who are dying, because under both situations, the view is better dead than disabled. After a brief review of our usual talking points against assisted suicide, I will concentrate on how these bills are aimed directly at people with disabilities. We make three main points from a public health perspective. Our first point is that millions of people are misdiagnosed every year in this country, including thousands of people labeled quote-unquote terminally ill, which is supposed to mean having 6 months or less to live. Doctors, though, are wrong all the time, and it's impossible to predict the future. These bills put everyone in the state under the threat of death by a simple misdiagnosis. A good example of this in your handout packet is the letter from Jeanette Hall from Oregon that she wrote to the Boston Globe in 2012. She believed the hype that assisted suicide was necessary to prevent suffering and pain at death, and so at the Oregon ballot initiative, she voted for it. And when she herself was given a terminal diagnosis, she went to her doctor and asked for the lethal drugs because, as she wrote, she didn't want to suffer. The doctor persuaded her to try more treatment, and eventually she agreed, and now 17 years later, she is warning other people not to fall for this type of bill. We also have the example of Ted Kennedy in this state, who was given 2 to 4 months to live, but lived 15 more meaningful, productive months, and he got to see his choice for president, Barack Obama, inaugurated. Believing that assisted suicide, you can't have choice when you don't have accurate information. This is one of the main argument of proponents, is to provide people with end-of-life choices. But you have to have perfect information. If someone tells you that you're gonna die in 6 months and you believe them, you could end up dead when in reality you might be living months, years, or decades. And many people in the disability community have been judged terminally ill, some more than once. It's practically a joke. You also don't have a choice when insurance companies and state Medicaids refuse to cover your prescribed treatment. A young mother in California, Stephanie Packer, received a letter from her insurance company after assisted suicide took effect in California. They wrote that they would not cover her prescribed treatment, but when she checked to see what the situation was with assisted suicide, they told her that of course they cover it and her copay would be $1.20. You don't get a choice when you are abused. 1 out of 10 people over the age of 60 in Massachusetts are abused every year, and that includes many people with disabilities. This could be financial, emotional, or physical. Most abuse comes from family members who may be more interested in inheriting the ill person's estate than keeping them alive. An heir, someone in line to inherit after someone's death, can serve as a witness to the request, can pick up the drugs from the pharmacy and bring them home, and because there's no official witness required at the death, they are free to take action without anyone knowing. And because everyone involved in the assisted suicide is granted immunity, there's not even a chance of investigation. There's also a huge difference among people who support and oppose these bills. As the voting results from ballot question 2 in 2012 show, assisted suicide pits wealthier, whiter areas of the state against those with poorer people and people of color. Blacks and Latinos oppose assisted suicide by 2-to-1 margins. For example, the 4 most Latino cities in the Commonwealth, Lawrence, Chelsea, Holyoke, and Springfield, all voted strongly against question 2. If assisted suicide was a benefit for everyone, it would be used across the demographic spectrum. But it's only one group, wealthier, whiter people for the most part. In Oregon, after 25 years, only one black person has ever used the program. The impact on disabled people is immediate and dire. The first group of people who are immediately threatened are people who are experiencing depression. The bill doesn't care whether you are severely depressed, as long as, in the opinion of one psychologist, the depression does not cause quote-unquote impaired judgment. As Ruthie Poole of the state group Empower testified, this is an advocacy group for people with lived experience of mental health diagnosis, trauma, and/or substance abuse. She testified against the last bill, saying, "Those of us at Empower know that depression is insidious and how it affects thinking. Against the new provision, we know that depression does impair judgment. As a therapist once told me, depression does not cause black and white thinking, it causes black and blacker thinking. Absolute hopelessness and seeing no way out are common feelings for those of us who have experienced severe depression. Personally, as someone who has been suicidal in the past, I can relate to the desire for a painless and easy way out. However, depression is treatable and reversible. Suicide isn't. Many of us in Empower have received harmful psychiatric care and so have a healthy mistrust of mental health professionals. Historically, people with psychiatric diagnoses have been subjected to all forms of legal and extra-legal coercion, often abetted by these same professionals. Based on these experiences, we cannot trust that consulting psychologists or psychiatrists will have our best interests in mind when evaluating our motives for requesting assisted suicide. People in the midst of a severe depression can usually present as unimpaired, especially at a single meeting with an unknown psychologist or psychiatrist who is in the business of labeling suicide rational. The bill specifically targets people with physical disabilities also, with this better dead than disabled mindset. So when a disabled teenager like Jerica Bolin, a couple of years, announces her intention to commit suicide, people around her support her depressed wish. The media covers it as a heartwarming story, and her community raises $36,000 to have a ghoulish pre-death prom. Any other teenager would receive suicide prevention services. A lot of testimony and a lot of the media hype talks about pain and suffering and pain not being controlled, but what we learned from the Oregon and Washington reports is that it's almost all psychosocial distress about disability. First is distress about dependence on other people, which they call losing autonomy. Second is distress over lost abilities. These are both at 90%, followed by feelings of shame and perceived actual loss of social status. They call that loss of dignity. And distress about needing help with incontinence. That's about half people. There's also more than 40% of people who are reported as wanting to die because they feel like a burden. That gives the lie to any notion that this is a free choice. If people are going to have a choice, they would have to have funded in-home supports. Basically, people with disabilities, we reject as bizarre and dangerous the notion that personal dignity is somehow lost through reliance on others or because we're not continent every hour of every day. That's why for 40 years the disability rights movement has insisted on funding programs to provide necessary personal care attendant services for all disabled people, including people disabled by their serious illness. The bill would set up a two-tier system under which some people get suicide prevention, while others, disabled people, get suicide assistance. The difference between the two groups would be based on value judgments about so-called quality of life. Many of us already get told straight to our face and through medical hostility that we might be better off dead. Okay, next. 11 other Massachusetts disability groups have taken a position against legalized assisted suicide. Nationally, every disability rights group that has taken a position on the matter has come out against it. What we need to do is make sure that people have the choices and supports to live pain and burden-free at home. You know, please remember elders and disabled people who may be vulnerable and without the sort of support and control assisted suicide proponents take for granted. Innocent people will lose their lives under these bills, and we won't be able to know who. And basically, under the law, there should be no place for quality of life distinctions between some people and all people. We are all equal under the law. So I hope that the advisory board will continue your opposition to assisted suicide and write a letter to the Public Health Committee. Thank you.
John, can I ask a question? Can you give us just a brief summary of when the bill is coming before and what the next steps are before it actually would pass into law?
Sure. The bill is going to be heard on September 26th before the Public Health Committee. And there will be a hearing. We need people to come testify about personal experiences, especially people who have been misdiagnosed, people who, you know, value their lives and reject any notion that our lives are worth less than other people. There will be a legislative briefing on September 21st in the members' lounge in the, of the House, at the State House, and that will run from 12 p.m. to 1, and we'll have a few speakers speaking to different aspects of how the bill affects various populations.
Is this the same bill that was before the legislature last year?
Pretty much. One change is that in the last bill, the death certificate would read self-administered due to cancer or ALS, but I guess that was too bitter a pill for people to swallow, so now it's just back to falsifying the death certificate.
To say what?
To say the underlying disease.
Oh.
So after you take an overdose of barbiturates, the death certificate would say died of cancer. So that forecloses investigations into what's going on.
Just one more question. Could we get like a snapshot of what the national landscape looks like for this? I know it's legal in Oregon. Is it, do you know how many states have it legalized?
Sure. Oregon and Washington. Oregon legalized it in the 90s. Washington in the 2000s. Vermont legalized it, I think, 3 years ago. California just legalized it last year. Meanwhile, there have been bills in almost every state, and we've continued to defeat them. Colorado also legalized it through a referendum, and unfortunately people, especially on a libertarian bent, think that this people gives you choice and keeps the government out of your business when it's actually the opposite. The government is making a recommendation that for some people, death is better than life.
Questions, comments?
Carl?
What are you asking for Are you asking for anything specifically from this commission?
I would like a letter of opposition to be sent to the Public Health Committee. The advisory board has sent letters, I think, since 2012, stating opposition. And, you know, it's just, these bills are a direct threat and rejection of the ability of disabled people to live independently in the community with appropriate
Do you know the bill
supports.
number off the top of your head?
Yes, H 1194 is the House bill, and S 1225 is the Senate bill.
Okay.
Can you share the email address with us for where the letter would go?
I will, I don't have that.
It would go to the chair of each, the House committee and the
Right.
Senate committee. I can get that information.
And that's Kate Hogan from the House, which is where the staff is located, and Jason Lewis in the Senate. And we've been successful lobbying the committee over the past sessions. And, you know, most of them realize that this is a bill that threatens people. And people also respect the will of the voters who voted in 2012. There will almost certainly be a bill next year in 2018 that will go to the ballot, and it will be a very challenging campaign for us because the voters that sent the bill in 2012 to defeat were people of color who came out to vote for Barack Obama and Elizabeth Warren. This is going to be an off-year election. There is going to be, I think, is it a millionaire's tax on the ballot in 2018 to change the state constitution to allow the state to charge different rates for different income groups. And so we're hoping that that might get more people out to the polls. And also Elizabeth Warren will be running for re-election.
Just one more question. Where did this initiate from? Are there big groups that are pushing for it? Is it insurance companies or hospitals?
Insurance companies, not that we know of, and I think we would all, from a common sense perspective, see that it's not in their interest, but I don't think they want to touch this and actually weigh in on it. The main people promoting it are a group called Compassion and Choices, which are euphemisms for assisted suicide. This group was originally called the Hemlock Society, and they basically use a so-called terminal illness as the hook to hang the assisted suicide legislation. Only in the United States and the UK have proponents put in the requirement that you be judged to be terminally ill. In every other country, people with severe disabilities are included from the beginning. And so it's a testimony to the hard work of disability rights advocates that they've had to pretend that it's really about protecting pain and suffering at the end. But you know, when people are asked and speak more honestly, it's really things like, I can't stand the thought of my partner wiping my butt. It really gets down to basic issues of personal care, which threatens the value and the basis of the lives we lead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. We'll take this up further down the agenda, whether we want to, we'll put it under new items to discuss whether we want to send you a letter of support or not.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen.
Next is the chair's report. I don't have much to say, other than thank you for those who sent in the three topics that they would like to see the Disability Commission to work on. If you haven't done so, please continue to come up with ideas. I am also guilty of not coming up with an item of 3 things, but maybe we can put together a complete list for the August or September meeting and discuss which priority the commission would like to take on. The other thing is, I know in the fall that we will have an election with all these new board members, so if anybody would like to run for any of the positions, which are chair, vice chair, secretary, and I don't know why we have treasurer, but we do.
It's in the bylaws.
Yeah, I know. So, but I don't get to have control of your budget. So we also have a treasurer position, which is more in name. But, so if any of you would like to run for any of the positions, please email, why don't you email the board, the commission at large, and then also if you'd like to be on the nominating committee, which we'll put together at the August meeting, we can put together a nominating committee. Now, if you're on the nominating committee, it means you're not running for office, because typically you can't nominate yourself. So please send out, I will send out, tomorrow, I will send an email out to everybody at large, reminding them to come up with 3 action items if you haven't already done so, asking if you want to run for office, and I'll list the positions, and also asking if you want to be a nominating committee. So I will do that tomorrow, and we'll go from there. That's basically all I have for the chair's report. Next, I would like to go over to Commissioner McCosh and have her give her report.
Wait, Carl, can I just ask you, when you send us the information, can you also send us the recommended topics from people who've already turned things in?
Can I also send out what people have already suggested?
Yeah.
Sure, I can put those together, sure.
That would be great, thanks.
Okay.
Carl, just another question in regards to that. This is Jerry speaking. How many people would be on a nominating committee, for example? How many people would you need?
You know, it's been a long time since we've done this. Since we have 4 positions to fill, we can't have that many people on the nominate. So why don't we say maybe 1 person from Commissioner McCosh's office and 2 members of the board.
How many people on the board currently?
We have 7 people on the board.
So that makes it tricky.
Oh, I'm sorry, 8.
8. All right, well, so why don't we say two members from the board on the nominating commission, on the nominating committee, along with maybe someone from your office.
Yep, that sounds good.
Thanks for that clarification.
Well, thank you for the question, because I didn't know until now. Next is, any other questions before we move on to the commissioner's report? All right, thank you. Commissioner McCosh, please.
Thank you, Carl. So to begin, I'd like to announce some upcoming events that the board is welcome to attend, along with the community in general. The City of Boston is having a series of summer block parties where residents can come out and meet the different department heads from different agencies in the city. A lot of human service department heads will be there, myself, the head of Fair Housing and Equity, the head of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, Veterans Commission, Boston Centers for Youth and Family, the Public Health Commission. So the dates for those are going to be on July 27th in the South End, August 3rd in Mattapan, August 10th in South Boston, August 17th in Roslindale, and August 26th in East Boston. And I'll send out more information by email, but these block parties are a great place to come out and meet the people who work for you and tell them about the issues that you want us to work on. Just to reiterate from earlier, I would love it if people would attend our announcement about the housing policies on Wednesday at 11 a.m. The mayor will be announcing them, so you'll get to meet the mayor if you haven't met him yet. And it will take place on the 5th floor in the mayor's office in the Eagle Room. So please attend if you're free. Also Wednesday night is a screening of Finding Dory And that's going to be at the Nonprofit Center, is that right, John? 88 South Street in Boston.
Regarding Finding Dory, because I've done some work with Pixar.
It's in
Hi
Cambridge.
there.
Oh, it's in Cambridge, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I was thinking of the movie
I
last
know
week.
for a fact that that film is audio described on the DVD. Are you going to play it with audio description too, or you just playing it with the captions?
Hi, Carl. This is Jessica. I know that that's been asked of the Cambridge Disability Commission, and I know that they're looking into it. This is part of the Disability Reframed movie series that our office does in partnership with the Cambridge Disability Commission. We alternate between locations. And so Cambridge is hosting this one, and I know it's been brought to Commissioner Mike Mui. As to whether or not it'll be audio described, I don't have that answer for you right now. But it will be at Cambridge Public Library at 6 to 8:30. There'll be a brief discussion afterwards. And then also related to the summer block parties, I just want to make one quick correction. The Thursday one in East Boston will be August 24th at the BCYF Paris Street. And additionally, there will be one on Tuesday, August 15th in Dorchester at the BCYF Laney Holleran Center. Thank you.
Yes, I was thinking of the movie that was screened last week at the Nonprofit Center, so thank you for that correct information. And then finally, our big event every year, our annual ADA Day celebration, is going to be on Tuesday, July 25th, so it's a week from tomorrow, on City Hall Plaza. And this year we'll be honoring the Boston Planning and Development Agency, along with the Disability Housing Task Force, for all their work on these recommendations and implementing this policy to make housing more accessible for Boston residents. And the event includes remarks by possibly Mayor Walsh, if he's in town, and remarks from the Housing Task Force. We also have food, music, t-shirts, adaptive equipment from Spalding, information from different agencies who serve people with disabilities. So it's a really fun day. I welcome everybody to attend. Some other updates I have are about our office. We currently have 2 open positions that we hope to be filling soon. We also have 3 interns that working with us this summer. One is a youth from the City of Boston through the City of Boston's summer job program. We also have an elderly gentleman through the Mass Rehab Commission, who we work with the Mass Rehab Commission every summer to place 8 to 10 adults in different jobs across the city. It's a job training program for them, so they're paid for the work, and then they use that as a way to launch into hopefully full-time employment. We also have a fellow who's working with us, so I know we've talked about her at the last few meetings, and she is working on an accessibility survey. I believe she emailed it to you in preparation for this meeting, and just a way to think about it is that she's broken it down into 3 brackets of issues. The first bracket deals with issues that we control directly, things that are under the auspices of the city, such as sidewalks, audio pedestrian signals, and voter access. The second bucket is issues that we can influence because we collaborate with the agencies and companies who oversee them, things like building projects in the private domain, things like that. And the third bucket of issues is things that we can advocate for because we don't have any real working relationships with the groups that oversee them, things like the MBTA and Uber, just things that are separate from our office. So we'd love to get a big turnout with the survey so we can really see where we can focus our resources because, as everyone these days knows, there are limited resources and we want to make the most of our new staff's time and our time so that we can better serve people with disabilities. And I believe that is all that I have. So I will turn it back over to Carl unless anybody has any questions.
Commissioner, it's Jerry again. Is the survey, I know, the survey was emailed to everybody on the group, in the group. Does that mean it's ready to be distributed? And if so, where is it going to, or how is it getting to the community at large?
So this is probably the final, close to the final draft. We've had several iterations of the survey. So this is basically our user testing step. So it's not finalized yet, but we hope that when we get your responses, we'll be able to tweak it for a final version. And we have our site set on ADA Day, either to announce it or to launch it. We just have to see if we can conclude it by then. And as far as who it will go out to, we'll spread it widely. We hope that you'll spread it widely. It's going to be set up on a survey tool, something like a Survey Monkey, most likely. And all the data will automatically collect, and then we can sort it and analyze it. We also have a mailing list and email distribution list of over 1,000 people. We have contacts with numerous agencies, so we're really hoping to get a big turnout. I know that the Elderly Commission did a survey last summer, and I'm trying to think, do you know how many responses they got? It was a huge turnout. It was for making Boston an age-friendly city.
Yeah, so I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that it was a very large, very well-funded surveying project that was in partnership with UMass Boston, and I believe the AARP. And so it was very extensive, and I think they had thousands of people fill out the survey or in some form, either electronically or paper. And they did a lot of community meetings and very extensive outreach. But I believe it was thousands.
It was definitely thousands. I just don't know if it was 5,000 or 10,000. But we'll also talk about ways to implement it. We do have a position posted for an outreach and engagement specialist. So once that person is hired, hopefully this summer, they'll be able to do listening sessions or take it out to different groups. And we'll also have it available on paper and online.
Commissioner, this is Felicia Birdsong. So the draft that we have that you want back from us, are we giving you feedback or just want us to fill out in terms of getting it back?
Feedback would be great.
Okay, and then hopefully within 2 weeks or so, we'll be able to send out child service?
Yep, that's the goal.
All right.
Of course, I, as a blind person, I'm always thinking about accessibility, so I just want to know, is anybody going to check the accessibility of the electronic version of this for screen reader users?
We absolutely will, and I could probably use your help on that.
Okay. And you mentioned the you mentioned audio pedestrian signals. It's part of the survey, and this really has nothing to do with the survey, but I just want to tell you on the way here, I had to cross 3 busy intersections to get here, and I was thinking, how cool is it now that I know when it's safe to cross? So it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, exactly, and these are the things that we want to know that really impact people's lives, because technology is changing so rapidly, so wherever we can channel our efforts, we will.
So, any other questions for the commissioner?
I just, Commissioner Jerry again, I just had another question about the housing task group and the announcement. I was excited to learn about that one of the goals coming out of it was that you're gonna try to have a database of all either available units or a better handle on where the units are and how many units there are and for people to have access to that information. Is there a goal as to when that type of database would be up and running, or?
We don't have a timeline set for that yet. After the announcement, we're going to meet internally and look at all the objectives that we laid out. I know there's currently the Mass Access Database.
Right.
Fair Housing and Equity has the Metro list. So there are pools of databases all over the place, but we really want to have one centralized location. One thing that we'll be giving out Wednesday is a guide that we've developed, which talks about all the city departments and what they do in regards to housing. Because even just in the city, we have the BHA, Fair Housing and Equity, D&D, we have our office. So there are a lot of agencies in the city alone that work on housing.
Sure.
So people get very confused, understandably. So this guide will at least help people navigate the city's offices. And then the database will be a longer-term project.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner, I have one other question. This is actually about the Housing Task Force as well, and I probably should have asked the gentleman that was there, but while they're working on this, is there a focus on residents that are paying really high rents that they can't afford? Like if they have a budget of $1,200 a month and their rent is $1,000, is there a way to help those folks in terms of getting them subsidy or helping them along with the rent? Is there a focus on that at all?
There isn't a specific focus on that as part of the task force, but we do ask questions about that on our survey to find out what the housing barriers are. And we break that down into affordability, accessibility. So once we get those results, we can use that data to take it to different departments like the BPDA and say, people can't afford to live here, and that's
Right.
what we're finding. If we got something like 5,000 results and we get 3,000 people say that they can't afford the rents, that will be really impactful. So that's why we really want to get the survey out to a broad number of people.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for the commissioner? Okay, great job, and I hope we can all, as many of us as possible, can show up on Wednesday for the Disability Housing Task Force announcement, and also next week for ADA Day.
I just have one question regarding this Wednesday. Until what time is it going to be?
Probably 11 to 11:30.
Great. Next is the Architectural Access Update. Patricia Mendez.
Thank you, Carl. Good evening, board members. My name is Patricia Mendez, Architectural Access Specialist. I'm going to give you the Architectural Access Report. I serve on the Architectural Access Board, and one of the highlights on the last meeting was the MBTA hearing about the capital accessibility projects, and that includes bus stop upgrades, Red Line at Wollaston, Orange Line at Ruggles, Oak Grove and Forest Hills, Green Line at Babcock, Pleasant, BU West and St. Paul, Symphony and Newton Highlands. Commuter Rail, Mansfield, Chelsea, Winchester, Natick and South Attleboro. Also, regarding the Architectural Access Board, I am going to participate at the hearing for bill number H2498 on Wednesday at the State House. I'm preparing my testimony in support of the bill. This bill will improve job opportunities for persons with disabilities and will help compliance for designers and developers for accessible parking spaces. The other important point of this bill is that it will update the language of the law. It will replace the terms used right now that is physically handicapped. It will be replaced for the words persons with disabilities. And lastly, it would improve housing opportunities for persons with disabilities by eliminating one of the loopholes that exist right now in the law. And renovations for existing buildings, it will eliminate the requirement where it allows to provide really small units that won't be able to be adaptable in the future.
Excuse me, can you just repeat the bill page?
Yes.
Bill number?
Thank you for that question. The number is H2498, and the hearing date is Wednesday, July 19th at 10 a.m. in room A2 at the State House.
So, if you don't mind, Patricia, can I add a little bit?
Please.
So is this taking CMR 521, is that, and making it equivalent to the ADA, is that the bill?
No, this is not it. No,
You said building regulations, so I'm trying to figure out which building regulations you're talking about. It's gonna change some of the building regulations for employment, housing, and change some of the language. So I'm assuming you're talking the language within 521.
You're correct. It is 521 CMR, but
Right.
it's not going to make it the same as ADA, with the exception of the parking
Right.
item that will be aligned with the federal ADA.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Massachusetts has their own set of guidelines that precede the Americans with Disabilities Act architectural guidelines, which is 521 CMR, which stands for Code of Massachusetts Regulations, and it's propagated by the Department of Public Safety and the Architectural Access Board, which Patricia serves on, and those have actually been in place since 1968, well before the ADA. Or the Architectural Aspect Board has been in place since 1968. So building developers in Massachusetts have to follow both sets of guidelines, and they have to follow, currently they have to follow the one that is more favorable to the person with a disability. So this just, this bill has been in a couple of sessions, former sessions. Last time it passed the Senate, but it didn't get out of the House. So the fact that it's an H bill tells me it's a House bill this time around. And I think when we discussed under new action items whether or not we should support the Second Thought Initiative, we should also discuss whether we want to support this one or not. There's a couple of strong areas in this bill that I like, in particular, I myself, particularly that of employment. Right now, there's not a lot in CMR 521 that, this would strengthen the employment section. So it would make employers have to make their spaces more accessible to people with disabilities. That's one strong area. And the language would be, like she said, it would change some of the language to be more favorable. So I think this committee should, or this commission should consider writing a letter of support. So that's just something when we get to, I didn't mean to interrupt your report, I just wanted to add some more history so that they were aware of what was being discussed.
Oh, thank you, Carl. And going back to your original question, I made a mistake in my answer. I didn't understand your question, but yes, you are correct, saying that this bill will align with the ADA federal
Right,
requirements.
so developers won't have to have two set of standards quite as much.
Yes, correct.
And I just have one follow-up question on the bill. So the language changing from handicap to persons with disabilities, that will only be within this bill? It won't be in all bills in Massachusetts, is that correct?
I'm only aware about this bill that I've
Okay.
been studying all week, but I could look up
I
other
thought that
bills.
was pending somewhere. Do you know about that, Carl?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I thought there was a bill pending to change all the language in the state.
There was.
From
I thought that
handicap.
passed, so I'm a little- I'm
It did
a little-
pass? Okay.
Passed last year.
So now, moving forward, everything will be persons with disabilities
Yeah.
rather than handicap. Great. Thank you.
Any other questions on the bill?
Not for me, anyway.
Thank you for the support. Another few things I'd like to mention is that we've been working on the sidewalk accessibility for the intersection of Tremont and Boylston. There's a lot of construction there. For the last year, there has been this scaffolding, and it's been problematic for persons with disabilities. We've been working with Meg Robertson from the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind and with the city, with BTD, in improving the sidewalk at that intersection. Also, we've been working with National Grid, discussing future of vault covers. These are big utility covers that encompass almost the entire sidewalk, around 12 feet by 5 feet. So we're trying to make them change their design to have the surface to be concrete instead of metal plate. So we're working on that. And lately, one of the complaints that we received is about the sidewalk at the Back Bay station, and we've been working with MassDOT and other agencies, MBTA, to report this problem and try to work a solution for our constituents. That's it for me. Any questions?
Any questions for Patricia?
This is John. Just an observation coming here today. State Street is like really buckling at this point on the side of City Hall.
The pavers, the brick pavers?
Yeah. I mean, it is literally like waving at this point.
Is that on the slope?
Yeah.
Okay.
Up near the bus stop in particular.
There's like old City Hall pavers and new? Is it right there?
Yeah, I think it's mostly old.
Old, okay.
On State Street, you said?
Yeah, right after I made the mistake of starting down the yellow brick path and then realized I wasn't gonna get in on the third floor, so then I swung back onto State Street to come down the hill. And that's when I came across it.
I think you mean on the block, which is Court Street and,
Yeah,
yeah, okay. It changes from State Street to Court Street on that
Yeah.
block.
Do you mean by the Ames Hotel
Yeah.
area?
yeah. Just after the Ames, heading this way.
Heading towards City Hall, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll check it out.
heading towards Congress.
Which is too bad, because that was only done about 4 years ago.
Thank you, Tim.
On the good news side, I will add that there is construction right now on Huntington Avenue, and they literally built around the Huntington wooden ramps on and off the sidewalk, complete with handrail and taping on the wood, so that nobody would get splintered. I mean, it was like the most beautiful job I had ever seen as far as a company doing it the right way, so that you can get right on and off the sidewalk.
That's good news.
So we have some good news out there.
Other questions?
Go ahead.
Yes, here's Ducia. I just have a question. You were talking, I think you were talking about something regarding the renovation or related around the T stations. You're talking about Rocco Station and others. Can you elaborate what I heard you talk about, but I didn't catch what you were saying.
Yes. So as part of the Architectural Access Board, I was present at this meeting where there was a hearing where MBTA had to come to the Architectural Access Board and present and talk about the projects that are coming up in the next couple of years until 2018, and they listed the accessibility projects coming up. So there's more information about this, but I was just making a list of the projects mentioned. I'll be happy to give you more information on any particular that you're interested, or I could repeat the list if you like.
Well, the list, I'm sorry, the list that you mentioned, the names that you mentioned, are those projects complete or no?
No, they're coming up,
Okay.
they're in design, and they're going to be completed or started at least in the next 2 years.
Typically, when a group or an organization meet before the Architectural Access Board, Patricia, it's there because they're asking for variance requests. Were they asking for any variances, or were they just informing you of what they're planning to do for accessibility?
They were informing us about their plans for accessibilities, and some of them, they're planning to ask for variances.
So is there a way, now that we have a new board, that might want to offer input to let us know about the variance request for the MBTA? Because public transportation is a big deal.
Yes, it is. Thank you for bringing that point. I have an announcement to make of an upcoming public meeting just about this, and I was almost forgot. The Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority invites you to public information meeting for the Symphony Station Accessibility Project on Wednesday, July 26, 2017, at 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., Berklee College of Music, 1140 Boylston Street, Boston, Massachusetts. So this is Wednesday, July 26th. And yes.
What's that meeting for? Is that to discuss design?
Yes, they started the design. I think it's 25% design, and they're having a public input meeting on an evening.
And is that currently not accessible, that station?
Correct. Symphony Station.
Symphony,
Symphony, yeah. But I think Kyle raises a good point in that,
But is there a way that we could
Yeah.
see, in order to do a variance request, your office gets a hard copy of the variance request, along with the Architectural Access Board. I mean, one goes to them, but one also has to go to the city. Is there a way that, I know a lot of them are like for buildings and restaurants and things like that, but, you know, public transportation is a, you know, we only have one shot at this for the next several
Yeah.
decades, probably. So is there a way that the board at large could see the variance request for anything to do with the MBTA, a hard copy, or what, you know, even if you just scan it in and send it to us, so that we could offer input and advice if we want?
I think this is what we talked about a few meetings ago, a way to loop the board into the AAB variance requests. For years, the request would go to the City of Boston Disability Commission and also the Disability Commission chairperson. I know John Kelly got those notices for a long time.
I don't know
So
who's getting them now.
I don't either, but maybe just our office, but once we have a new chairperson, we'll be sure that they get looped in. And moving forward, we definitely want to loop the board in on any variance that has an important impact. But I think that you make a good point where we should definitely call out the ones that are like MBTA, because they have a huge impact on us.
Perhaps we can put a policy in place, you know, at every monthly meeting, you bring up all the MBTA variance requests and discuss those.
We will,
Something like that.
we don't get all that many from T, do we?
There's not that many about the T, but there are some significant
Some significant
that
ones.
I'll be
We'll-
happy to highlight to
Yes,
the
we'll do that.
commissioner.
Thank you, that's a good point.
Any other questions for Patricia? Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Thanks.
If someone can help me out with the agenda, because my memory's fading. Is old action items next or new action items?
Old business.
Old business.
Okay, that's what I thought. Do we have any old action items anybody on the committee would like to discuss?
No.
All right. Here and then, we'll move on to new action items, and I know we have at least two things that we're going to discuss. One, I don't know, not having worked with this board on this particular issue yet, this commission, I would like to hear whether everybody would like to support Second Thought, as this commission has done in the past with a letter of support.
For what? I'm sorry.
Second thoughts.
Oh,
Carl, do you want to call for a vote?
Yeah, well, is the vote being put forth? Are you making a motion for one?
no.
I would.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I,
So we have everybody, and then we have one opposition?
yes.
Okay.
And one absent board member. One board member is absent.
Right. So the motion carried. We still have a majority vote to write a letter of support for Second Thought. Next, I would like to suggest that we consider writing a letter of support to the committee recommending that we support the bill being heard this Wednesday on revising CMR 521. I don't know if the chair's allowed to make up.
Mr. Chairman, why don't you explain what 521 CMR is?
You're making the motion to do that?
No, I'm suggesting you clarify what
Yeah.
521 is.
Clarify what it
Clarify
is.
what the motion.
521 CMR is the Architectural Access Board guideline for building code for people with disabilities, and that's what's being revised this Wednesday to also allow it to do employment, housing, and change some of the language so that the word handicap is taken out and says persons with disabilities.
I can add something a little bit more to that explanation. 521 CMR is the Massachusetts amendment to the International Building Code.
I know, I wanted to make sure people know.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would propose this body write a letter in support of the bill, as we have done in the past.
Any seconds?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Any other new action items that anybody else on the commission would like to bring forth? Hearing none, let's move on to public input. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? If so, please make your way up to the podium and announce yourself. And I'm gonna need some sighted help. Is anybody moving up?
No.
Nope.
No. Okay, this is my favorite motion of the night. Does anybody make a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Any second?
I do.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. No, I'm kidding. Motion carries. Have a good night, everybody. And the next meeting is Monday, August 28th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.